There is a soil amendment that can double tomato yields. It provides potassium, calcium, and trace minerals. It raises pH in acidic soils. It deters slugs and cutworms. It costs nothing. Wood ash is the residue left after burning hardwood. It contains 3 to 7% potassium oxide, 25 to 45% calcium oxide, and phosphorus, magnesium, boron, zinc, and manganese, all in bioavailable forms. Its pH ranges from 9 to 13, alkaline enough to correct soil acidity in a single application. From the 1600s through the 1940s, wood ash was standard practice in European and American kitchen gardens. This was not a folk remedy or a secret technique. It was written in agricultural manuals, recommended in government pamphlets, and applied by millions of households that burned wood for heat and used the ash to grow food. Today, it is actively discouraged in modern organic gardening guides. It is omitted from extension service recommendations and treated as obsolete, inconsistent, or risky. Its agronomic effectiveness has not changed. Its availability has not changed. Every household with a wood stove or fireplace produces it as waste. The practice that required no purchase disappeared the moment gardening became a consumer activity. Hardwood ash contains 3 to 7% potassium oxide. Tomatoes require high potassium for fruit development. Potassium deficiency produces small, pale fruit with low yields. The potassium in ash is water-soluble and immediately available to plant roots. Calcium makes up 25 to 45% of ash composition in the form of calcium oxide. This prevents blossom end rot in tomatoes, a calcium deficiency disorder that causes dark, sunken spots on the bottom of fruit. Calcium also strengthens cell walls throughout the plant. Wood ash raises soil pH by half a point to 1.5 points per application. In acidic soils below pH 6, nutrients become locked out, including iron, phosphorus, and calcium that are present in the soil but unavailable to plants. Raising the pH unlocks them, and ash does this while adding minerals. Trace minerals arrive as byproducts. Phosphorus is 1 to 3%. Magnesium is 3 to 4%. Micronutrients like boron, zinc, and manganese occur in smaller concentrations. All are bioavailable and all come from the combustion of wood tissue. Back in 1987, the Journal of Economic Entomology published a study on wood ash as a pest barrier. Slug and cutworm damage decreased by 60 to 70% in ash-treated plots. The ash's alkalinity and its abrasive texture deterred soft-bodied insects. A 2003 trial at the University of Maine Extension measured tomato yields in ash-amended plots versus control plots. In that trial, tomato yields increased by 55%. In 2011, MTT Agri-Food Research in Finland tested ash on brassicas. Yields increased 40 to 90%, depending on soil conditions. Wood ash contains the same potassium as potassium sulfate fertilizer, and the same calcium as agricultural lime, without processing, without transport, and without cost. It does what bagged fertilizer does, without the bag, the factory, or the price tag. Wood ash appears in monastic garden records from the 11th century through the 14th century. It was applied to brassicas, legumes, and fruit trees, not as an experiment, but as routine maintenance. In 1557, Thomas Tusser published 500 Points of Good Husbandry, an English agricultural manual written in verse. He recommended ash for roots and herbs. This was standard instruction, printed and distributed, not an alternative practice. European settlers brought the practice to colonial America. It became integral to kitchen garden maintenance in subsistence farming. When people burned wood to heat their homes through winter, the ash went to the garden in spring. The cycle was automatic. 18th and 19th century agricultural manuals documented specific application rates, 1 to 2 pounds per 10 square feet annually for vegetables. These were not approximations. They were tested recommendations, refined over generations. During World War II, the United States government published victory garden guides encouraging home food production. The 1942 through 1945 editions included wood ash as a recommended soil amendment. This was the last major institutional endorsement. Before 1950, wood ash was not a famine technique. It was not something people turned to when nothing else was available. It was baseline practice in home food production across 3 centuries. In Europe, in America, wherever people grew food and burned wood. It was not wisdom passed down in whispers. It was printed in government pamphlets. Before 1950, most households heated with wood or coal. Ash was a natural byproduct. Gardening advice assumed its availability. Application rates were standard knowledge. Timing was understood. Gardeners knew which crops benefited most. After World War II, suburbanization accelerated. Through the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s, home heating shifted from wood and coal to oil, natural gas, and electricity. Suburban homes were built without fireplaces, or with decorative fireplaces that were rarely used. Ash production in suburban households declined sharply. At the same time, suburban garden centers proliferated. The business model required recurring product sales, seeds, fertilizers, soil amendments, pest controls, tools. The garden center served a new demographic, suburban homeowners with disposable income and limited time. Synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizers were marketed as modern, scientific, precise. Each bag listed exact nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium percentages. Wood ash, by contrast, was framed as old-fashioned, inconsistent, messy. The packaging made the difference. Bagged lime, potassium sulfate, and bone meal became standardized products. Clean, stackable, branded. Wood ash had no brand, no packaging, no profit margin. Extension services at land-grant universities began shifting recommendations in the 1960s and the 1980s. Agribusiness partnerships increasingly funded research and outreach. The advice moved toward commercial products, not because wood ash stopped working, but because the institutions advising gardeners were funded by the companies selling alternatives. By the 1980s, most suburban homes no longer produced wood ash. Even households that knew the practice could not access the material. The infrastructure had changed. Oil furnaces and gas heaters produced no ash, and electric heating produced nothing at all. Wood ash then took on a cultural meaning. It became associated with poverty and rural backwardness. The modern gardener bought amendments in bags for clean hands, measured doses, and convenience. The practice did not become obsolete. The infrastructure that made it free disappeared. After the 1970s, gardening guides began emphasizing caution around wood ash, warning about burn risk from its alkalinity and concerns that over-application could cause a pH imbalance. The language shifted from instruction to discouragement. Critics pointed to variability in nutrient content. Hardwood ash contains more potassium than softwood. Deciduous trees produce different ratios than coniferous. Burn temperature affects mineral concentration. Compared to bagged fertilizers with printed percentages, ash seemed imprecise. The organic gardening movement of the 1970s and the 1980s promoted compost, manure, cover crops, and other natural amendments. Yet, wood ash rarely appeared in these recommendations despite being entirely organic, a waste byproduct with zero processing and effectively no additional carbon footprint beyond the heating it came from. Rodale Press published multiple editions of Rodale's Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening from the 1970s through the 2000s. It was one of the most influential gardening references in America. Wood ash received minimal coverage, or none at all. Not condemned, simply absent. In the 1980s and the 1990s, EPA regulations on wood smoke targeted air quality in suburban areas. The rules indirectly discouraged wood burning and reduced ash availability further. Fewer people burned wood. Fewer people had ash. Fewer guides mentioned it. Contemporary gardening books use careful language, saying it can be used sparingly if available, or that it is not recommended for most gardeners. This passive discouragement does not ban the practice, but it gently steers gardeners away from it. Agricultural lime became the standard pH adjuster. Calcium carbonate mined from limestone deposits was crushed and bagged, and marketed as safe and consistent, despite requiring extraction, processing, and transport. Wood ash, a waste product, was displaced by a mined resource. It was not banned. It was simply written out of the instructions. Wood ash is free. Garden centers cannot monetize it, so there is little incentive to educate customers on its use. A gardener who learns to use ash may stop buying lime and potassium supplements, and the transaction ends. Nutrient content varies by wood species and by burn temperature. This cannot be standardized for retail labeling requirements. A bag of potassium sulfate lists precise percentages. Ash composition changes with every batch. Regulatory systems designed for manufactured products cannot accommodate that variability. Ash must be stored dry. It is hygroscopic and absorbs moisture from the air. When wet, it loses effectiveness and becomes difficult to apply. Retail products need shelf stability. They need to sit in warehouses and on shelves for months without degrading. Ash cannot do this without specialized packaging. The pH of wood ash ranges from 9 to 13, making it highly alkaline. It can pose a minor burn risk to skin and eyes if handled carelessly. Retail liability insurance discourages stocking unpackaged, variable composition products. The legal exposure often outweighs potential profit. There is no branding potential. Wood ash cannot be trademarked. Any wood ash of the same wood type is functionally equivalent. That eliminates competitive advantage, and no company can claim theirs is better. By the 1980s, suburbanization removed wood-burning infrastructure from most households. Even gardeners who wanted to use ash could not produce it. There was no fireplace, no wood stove, no source. As the practice faded, the transfer of knowledge broke down. Younger gardeners never learned application rates, never learned timing, and never learned which crops benefit most. The information existed in old manuals and university archives, but it did not exist in accessible cultural knowledge. A product that cannot be sold cannot be promoted, even if it works. Because ash is free and not a retail commodity, it had no commercial champion, and the practice quietly disappeared. Global agricultural soils are losing potassium faster than it is being replaced. Commercial potassium fertilizers come from finite potash mines in Canada, Russia, and Belarus. These are geologically limited deposits. In 2022, the war in Ukraine disrupted global fertilizer exports. Potash prices spiked 300%. Home gardeners faced shortages and price increases. Supply chains that seemed stable revealed fragility. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers acidify soil over time. Gardeners increasingly need pH adjusters to correct this. Agricultural lime is the standard solution. Wood ash addresses both problems simultaneously. It provides potassium and raises pH. One material, two corrections. Commercial fertilizers require mining, processing, and transport. Each step carries embodied carbon. Wood ash is a waste byproduct of home heating. If wood is burned for heat anyway, the ash costs nothing in energy or carbon. Zero additional environmental footprint. Modern gardening optimizes for convenience. Pre-measured bags, consistent formulations, predictable results. Ash practice optimizes for self-sufficiency and waste utilization. Different priorities, different systems. Wood ash is still used by off-grid homesteaders, permaculture practitioners, and rural communities that burn wood for heat. The knowledge persists at the margins, not extinct, just removed from mainstream visibility. The agronomic reality has not changed. Ash still works exactly as it did in 1650. Tomatoes still need potassium. Acidic soils still benefit from pH adjustment. The chemistry is identical. The crisis revealed the fragility of convenience. The alternative had already been forgotten. It is a free soil amendment that can double yields, requires no processing, and addresses multiple deficiencies simultaneously. It was standard practice for 3 centuries, and now it is nearly extinct from cultural knowledge. Modern gardening measures success in convenience, in consistency, in purchase simplicity. Wood ash excels in metrics that have no shelf space. Cost per nutrient, carbon footprint per application, self-sufficiency per household. The agronomic knowledge never disappeared from scientific literature. University archives contain the studies. Extension bulletins from the 1940s document the rates. The information is preserved. It simply became inaccessible, buried in systems designed to sell, not to inform. Most suburban households no longer burn wood. Even if they wanted ash, they cannot produce it. Infrastructure determines what practices are possible. When the infrastructure changes, accessible knowledge changes with it. The question is not whether we should use wood ash again. The question is what else we optimized out of existence by optimizing for purchase. What other practices that required no transaction were quietly removed from the instructions? What other knowledge waits in archives while gardens depend on supply chains? The system that made gardening convenient also made it dependent. Wood ash did not stop working. We simply built a system that could not profit from it, and then we forgot it worked at all.